Late at night, I was driving down an almost deserted road in a none too savory part of town when a taxi pulled in too sharply, which forced me to swerve out of its way. I wiped out my front tire and had to drive around 300 yards to pull in and see the damage. The situation was bad. Bad enough for me to consider recovery, as opposed to me personally carrying out a roadside change. This area was scary, and I didn't want to spend too long alone in the open. Plus, I'm really quite bad at fixing cars. Anyway, I was sitting on the phone with recovery when a man tapped my window. I rolled the window down enough for him to talk, and he said, "I seen what happened there from my house. I'll help you change your car tire if you like." We conversed slightly, and he seemed nice enough, and wasn't the most physically imposing, so I hung up on recovery and we set about a roadside change. One of the wheel nuts was too tight, however, and we had to abort. The guy was starting to become almost pushy when he realized we couldn't get it done, asking me where I was going to leave my car if I couldn't get it recovered. I was slightly defensive at this point, not wanting to give too much away. He then offered to drive my car up to somewhere to park if I'd like. I told him I'd hang off and speak to recovery first, and anywhere the car was going, I'd drive it there myself. Anyway, he sat and waited. I spoke to the company, and we decided I'd leave the car and get it in the daylight, when recovery wouldn't have as much of a bad time finding me, and I'd get a taxi home, reimbursed from my insurance. I figured the car would be able to cover around a mile without running on the rim, which was far enough for me to get to some form of main street. The weird, helpful, scary stranger offered to lead me to his street, just off a main road to park up. Not knowing the area too well, it was good help, and despite the obvious creeps I was feeling, I decided to follow him, just to find my way to more populated parts. As I was following the guy, I realized I'd passed the point of the accident more than a quarter of a mile ago. He said he'd seen it from his house. My heart started pounding. I deliberately lost him at the next set of lights and got my car into a more accessible street. I called the taxi, and my car was recovered the next day. How he found out about the accident when it clearly wasn't what his version of events purported really scared me. It made me wonder what would have happened had I driven to where he had wanted me. This happened when I was about 18 or 19. One of the very few things to do in my town is just to drive around. One day, my friend told me he had visited Monkey Mountain. Monkey Mountain is a notorious little trailer park where the cops and ambulance won't even go in because the people are so crazy. There's tons of families living up there on various properties, and there's been rumors of inbreeding for years. There's only one road in and out, so we'd have to do a U-turn to leave. The weather was really crappy. We were going at night, and it was raining on and off. We got there, and it was pretty quiet. No one was out because of the weather, which I was mildly thankful for. We passed the fourth or fifth trailer, and saw someone open the door and just watch us go. The trailer was connected to a huge junkyard that looked like something out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. We saw a few other people watch us go by as well. I remembered my grandpa telling me that they call each other up when they see a car they don't recognize. At this point, though, I wasn't too panicked. We reached the end of the park without incident and headed over to a back road to turn around. We ended up at an abandoned and dilapidated cemetery that had tons of booze bottles and trash, and even a mattress near the entrance. It was like they party there. We turned around, and as we got back on the main road, we noticed a whole bunch of glass that wasn't there before, spread all across the road. We all just looked at each other like, what? We didn't even hesitate, and just floored it out of there. Luckily, the car's tires were fine. A car started following us, and rode with us for a long while, all the way until we reached the main town. The whole thing was really strange. My dad was a truck driver, and he's driven in many different states. When I was 15, I asked him if he had ever seen any weird stuff on the road. He only had one story, even though he'd been a driver for 20 years. I'll try to remember as much as I can. The way he told it, he was driving from Colorado to Minnesota, and was on a road just outside Nebraska. The sky was cloudy, so it was completely dark outside, except for the truck's headlights. Suddenly, the radio went from playing music to static. He tried changing the station, and every station he turned to was playing the same static. He then realized he couldn't hear anything else except for the sound of the static. He kept driving until finally the radio started playing normally again, and he could hear the sounds outside as well. All of a sudden, a deer jumped in front of his truck. He ran it over without braking so as to avoid a crash. He said he heard a scream that he swore to me sounded human. He slowed down so he could pull over and see what he hit. But when he stopped the truck and checked the front, there was nothing. No blood, no damage to the truck. Nothing. He took a flashlight and walked back to where he hit the deer. And once again, there was nothing. As if he had never hit anything at all. He shone the light around a little more, and after not seeing anything for a few more seconds, he hopped back in his truck and got out of there. I was driving on I-85 late at night when I got near the exit to the Kia plant. There were two small dogs right by the exit, and one was laying down like he was injured. The other one was standing nearby, making eye contact and looking worried. It was like he wanted someone to stop and help his friend. I missed the Kia plant exit, but started to feel bad for the little guys. I got off on the next exit and turned around, this time getting off at the Kia exit. When I drove across the overpass, the dogs were gone. I figured they must have wandered away from the highway, and I drove slowly around the nearby area. At this point, I was across from the factory. It was pitch black, and there were no street lamps. Suddenly, my headlights shone on a pug, standing defiantly in the middle of the street. He locked eyes with me. I looked around and saw the two from the exit coming out of some bushes. I looked the other way, and there were more tiny dogs coming out of the trees. I was literally surrounded by a pack of toy breeds. They looked like they meant business, and I decided not today, and noped out of there and continued home. They actually chased me down as I drove off. It was one of the most surreal and unfathomable moments of my life. A pack of toy breed dogs, led by a boogly-eyed pug, setting an ambush for a car. One hot summer night, I was driving down an empty road when way in the distance, I saw a man walking down the road, facing me. He was wearing like a suit or something. It was all black and had long sleeves, which I thought was weird considering how hot it was. As I started to get closer, I got a better look at him. He was tall, and his head was too round, and his eyes were too far apart. His mouth was too long, and all in all, he just looked like a creepy, stretched out, deformed baby. I was scared, but I was already driving by, so it's not like I was going to change my course. As I got up and passed him, his gross baby eyes met mine, and I got goosebumps. I looked in my rear view, and he was still walking the other way, but his head was flipped all the way backwards on his neck. He wasn't looking at me either, just staring straight. I flipped out and started crying. I sped off to the next gas station, and when I got there, I was shaking so hard I barely had the dexterity to open the door and get out. As soon as I got it open, I got out and threw up. The gas station people were really nice and concerned. They gave me coffee and told me that a few times a year, girls who were driving alone at night would run in freaking out, saying that they saw some creepy dude. It was the worst experience of my life. I called my mom and sister to come get me, and couldn't drive alone for a week. I'm not sure if you guys posting all of these are lying or honestly telling the truth, as some of this is pretty out there. Regardless, this happened to me and some friends of mine a few years back. We used to go four-wheel driving a lot into this big old pine plantation. I drove this old Suzuki Samurai with an open top because it was summer. Eventually, we started going there at night because it was kinda creepy, and over time, we kept going deeper and deeper. We repeatedly joked about the car breaking down or getting bogged, and started bringing a camcorder with us. It was pretty cool. We came across something creepy each time, like an old baby's cot or a large bunch of rotten fruit. One time, we went further than we ever had, and our minds started playing tricks on us. We got scared and decided to go home by doing a 3-point turn on the narrow road. At the point of the turn, where we reversed towards the bush, we stopped for a second, because we thought we heard something. Then, heard some kind of chain or something in the bush behind us. We got scared and sped off laughing. When we got home, we were still laughing about how scary and stupid that was, and decided to play back the video. At the exact time of the pause and silence before we sped off, there's a distinct whistling. Not like a wind through the trees, but an actual tune. I've replayed that moment a bunch of times in my head, and I'm certain no one whistled. We were all silent and listening for what we thought we heard. We returned a few more times, but needless to say, we never quite went that deep into those woods ever again. Our fear of old Whistlin' Pete made sure of that. In 2004, I was on a long road trip that led me through northwest Kansas. I had one of those first-generation smartphones, a Nokia 7610. I did have GPS, but it sucked, and would cut out if it didn't have a phone signal. It was taking me down this long dirt road, and I lost signal. I kept heading straight, in the hopes of eventually finding a signal again. After a while, I saw a farm, the only sign of civilization for miles. I slowed down and stopped to see if anyone was outside, and if I could maybe get some directions. The farm appeared to be abandoned, though, and there was rusting farm equipment around the barn. I almost started driving forward again when I saw some odd specks in the dirt in front of me. They were nails. Lots and lots of nails, kind of mixed into the gravel in front of me. I wouldn't have seen them at all if I hadn't stopped in front of the farm. I added an extra 30 miles to my trip, just to avoid any more dirt roads. And being the tremendous beta that I am, I didn't even bother telling any cops, in the off chance I was dealing with an evil redneck town scenario. I was going for a cross-state drive for the heck of it. About a week went by with nothing too crazy happening. Some weird and unsettling stuff, sure, but if you ever drive around an entire state, you'll see that kind of thing. On this one night, I had been driving and sightseeing all day, so I was kinda tired and my back was killing me. I decided to pull off into a secluded truck stop area on the side of the road. I stretched out in my truck's bed, listened to music, ate, and read a book. It was so serene, I fell asleep until it was dark. When I woke up, I decided I'd continue sleeping here and get going again in the morning. I got in the driver's seat, locked the door, got my knife, and fell asleep, only to wake up again in an hour, having to piss. I was having that little struggle where I was so comfy I didn't want to get up, when I saw something shift in the tree line. If it was an animal, I didn't want to get stuck in there having to piss all night, so I turned on the headlights. What I saw wasn't an animal, but some guy in a Halloween rabbit suit, like the one from CSI, not looking at me, but walking by. He turned to me and just stared. I thought I might be lucid dreaming, so I pinched myself. And no, this was real. After a few seconds, he started walking towards the car. I quickly turned it on, did a donut, and sped off onto the highway doing 70. It was the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. And I've done a few of these road trips. I'm thinking it was just some crazy homeless guy, or maybe some kids pulling a prank. But that's a lot of commitment, walking around the woods off a highway at night just for a prank. I was driving down a rural road one night, moving back home with my stuff in the trunk and back seat of my car. In the middle of nowhere, I ran over a nail or something and popped a tire. I drove on a little further and pulled off the road to the gravelly side near a crossroad. I was hoping I'd be more visible and maybe flag someone down, seeing as I didn't have a spare. I tried calling roadside services from the nearest town, but they were all closed. No mechanics available. After a tirade full of curses and tire kicking, I sat next to my car on the gravelly dirt, my back against the wheel, and bolts digging into my shoulders. My phone was dying because I had used it to listen to music instead of the crappy country radio stations. I was forced to turn it off if I wanted to get out of there in the morning. I was cut off from the world. I've never felt so isolated. I waited for what felt like 2 hours, with no other cars in sight. Then, I saw a man walking up to me and passing a ditch. It was beyond dark, so I couldn't make out his face. As I got up, he came closer. He offered to replace my tires, guaranteed them, and said they'll get me anywhere I wanted to go, that I could go anywhere I pleased, perfectly safe and without fail. I told him I didn't have any cash on me. He didn't seem interested, and said I could write him a promise to pay, which sounded crazy to me. I was clearly just passing through. I told him it was okay and that a tow truck was on its way. It's lucky you found one at this time of night." He said these words politely, but there was a definite hint of seething in them. He smiled. That I did see, like the Cheshire Cat. Then he walked back into the ditch and into the tall grass. I got back into the truck and waited 15 minutes, then just drove off on the flat for 30 kilometers, destroying my wheel. I didn't care. I was so done. I don't know what that guy's deal was. I wasn't waiting around for him to come back. Back in '08, my family lived in a village an hour away from the city. My brother worked in the city and would get up at 5 a.m. to go to work. He had done it for years now, so it was just routine. He was driving the same stretch of road that he had 1,000 times before. I've driven it myself, and it's very lonely, and at night, it's pretty spooky. So my brother was driving along when he saw a man standing in the middle of the road with his hand up, as if trying to shield his face from the high beams. My brother slowed down to a stop and saw what looked like a really old car off the side of the road. The guy was wearing what looked like a pinstripe suit for some reason. Mind you, this is in Canada, in the middle of the winter. My brother, thinking the guy might need help, got out of his truck. He turned to close the door, and when he looked back, there was no one around. The guy and the car were completely gone. After asking around from some people who drive that road every morning, all they ever say is, weird stuff happens on that stretch. One thing's for sure, though. You shouldn't get out of your vehicle. This happened roughly 6 months ago. I work as an armed security guard. I was relieved from my 8-hour shift, where I work in the industrial district of my town. I'm pretty tired when I get off shift, as it's pretty late, around 2:30 or 3 a.m. I started the drive, heading towards the freeway which leads home, when I noticed a car in my rearview mirror, without its headlights on, following me. I continued driving home like normal, while still keeping track of this car. I eventually headed down my street, which ends in a dead end. The car was still following me, and it had been about an hour's drive. I pulled over in front of my house, and I was a bit scared, because this guy had been following me for quite a while. I turned off my car and placed my right hand on my pistol as I opened my door to face the other car. I turned around and saw nothing, as if nothing was there in the first place. I skittered into my condo faster than I've ever done before. This is the only time something like that has ever happened. I still get a little bit creeped out every time I think about it. I'm a private security guard, and every night I drive a patrol route. One stop on my route every night is this canyon area up above LA. It was my first night on solo patrol, and the canyon was a new account. In order to get in, I had to go past this Jurassic Park style gate. Past that was an abandoned guard shack. So I'd take my little Prius up into the canyon, and eventually came to a tunnel. And if you're wondering, it looks exactly like the fabled Bunnyman tunnel. I was driving through the tunnel, gun drawn and sitting on the seat next to me, when a fog rolled in. My crappy, overused Prius was straining. The fog ahead cleared a bit, just in time for me to see a deer. A dead deer, being dragged into the bushes by, I swear to God, a long, skinny, gray arm. I hit the end of the road, and the GPS in the car pinged to let me know I had hit the route stop. The road just dead-ended into a grove of trees. No building, no pipes, no nothing. Just paved road and then trees. I quickly turned around and rode my brakes down the canyon. I put all my lights on and had a feeling of being watched. As I made a turn, I could see bushes shaking on the side of the road, like I had just missed something. I got back to the Jurassic Park gate and locked it. When I got back, I filed a report saying signs of trespassing, 'cause nobody was gonna believe the truth. The account closed with our company 3 months later. I never heard anyone else report anything weird. Come to find out, none of the other guards ever went up to the canyon. They'd all sit at the crossroad at the bottom and log vehicle difficulty or some other nonsense reason they couldn't make it up there, and just made sure the gate was locked. I talked to a couple of them after I left the company. They said they were all too scared to go up.